It happened deep inside the forest that many Nigerians have come to fear. Badurum Kasa Forest in Kauru local government area of Kaduna State, where 8 kidnapped people were suddenly freed, not through ransom, not through negotiation, but through a swift military push that forced their captors to flee. Now, let us look at this clearly, because this is not just another rescue story. It is a snapshot of Nigeria's ongoing struggle with insecurity, and at the same time, a reminder of what coordinated security action can still achieve when intelligence, timing, and local support come together. According to security sources, troops of Sector 7 of Operation Enduring Peace, working alongside the Zango Kataf Police Area Command, Civilian Joint Task Force, forest guards, and local hunters, carried out the operation on January 28, 2026. The mission was triggered by actionable intelligence, information that pointed clearly to a kidnappers' hideout deep inside the forest. At about 4:23 p.m., the joint team mobilized. This detail matters because it tells us something important. This was not a random patrol, and it was not a reaction after the damage had already been done. This was planned, deliberate, and time-sensitive. By 5:59 p.m., contact was made.
When the kidnappers sighted the troops, something telling happened. There was no prolonged gun battle. There was no standoff. The criminals abandoned their captives and fled into the bushes in disarray. 8 people, women, men, and children, were left behind alive and unharmed. They were immediately evacuated, medically checked, debriefed, and reunited with their families. The rescued victims were identified as Mrs. Rashida Musa, Mrs. Hafsat Nuhu, Mr. Zakari Saleh, Ms. Hasiya Yaya, Mr. Ahmed Yaya, Mr. Ibrahim Saiba, Ms. Salma Yaya, and Mr. Sofan Idris. Among them were teenagers and children as young as 11 and 13. And even after the rescue, the operation did not stop there. Troops reportedly commenced follow-up operations to track the fleeing suspects and deny them the ability to regroup. On the surface, this sounds like a clean success story. But as always, in Nigeria's security landscape, the deeper questions are just as important as the headlines.
Another angle to this issue is what it tells us about the nature of kidnapping in Nigeria today. These kidnappers did not stand their ground, they ran. That suggests a few things. First, it reinforces the idea that many criminal groups rely heavily on fear, isolation, and the absence of state presence. Once confronted with coordinated force, their advantage collapses quickly. Second, it raises questions about deterrence and follow-through. While rescuing victims is the immediate priority, and rightly so, the long-term legal challenge remains the same: apprehension, prosecution, and conviction of the suspects. Without arrests, this cycle risks repeating itself. Criminals flee, regroup, and return elsewhere. This is not a failure of the troops on the ground, but a systemic challenge involving terrain, manpower, intelligence continuity, and judicial capacity.
There is also the constitutional dimension. Security remains the exclusive responsibility of the federal government. Yet, this operation depended heavily on local actors, CJTF members, forest guards, and hunters. Their involvement highlights a reality Nigeria has quietly accepted. Federal forces alone cannot secure every inch of territory without community integration. But this arrangement also comes with unresolved legal questions. How are these local actors regulated? What protections do they have? What accountability frameworks exist if things go wrong? These are not criticisms of the operation. They are reminders that security victories must be institutionalized, not improvised, if they are to last.
From this point, we need to understand where this story sits within Nigeria's wider national mood. Kidnapping has become one of the most emotionally exhausting crimes in the country. It cuts across ethnicity, religion, class, and geography. From highways to villages, from school children to traders, nobody feels completely safe. Kaduna State in particular has carried a heavy burden. Over the years, communities have faced banditry, mass abductions, rural displacement, and economic paralysis. Farms abandoned, roads avoided, markets shrinking. So when 8 people are rescued from a forest like Badurum Kasa, it resonates far beyond their families. It sends a signal, however small, that the state can still push back. But at the same time, it exposes how normalized fear has become. Many Nigerians listening to this story will quietly ask themselves,
how many others are still out there tonight? Economic hardship also plays into this. Kidnapping thrives where poverty, unemployment, and weak governance intersect. Young men with no opportunities become easy recruits for criminal networks. Communities without infrastructure become hiding grounds. And then there is the ethnic and regional sensitivity. Southern Kaduna has long been a flashpoint for mistrust, grievances, and political tension. Every security operation here is watched closely, interpreted carefully, and sometimes politicized. That is why restraint, professionalism, and transparency matter just as much as firepower.
Now, let us pause and look at the human side of this story. Imagine the families of those 8 victims. Days or weeks of uncertainty, sleepless nights, phones ringing with unknown numbers, fear of ransom demands they cannot afford, the silent terror of imagining the worst. For them, this rescue is not a policy discussion, it is life returning to normal. Children back home, mothers reunited, trauma replaced, at least momentarily, by relief. Supporters of the military will point to this operation as proof that troops are working under difficult conditions, risking their lives in forests most Nigerians will never see. And that argument holds weight. Critics, however, will ask harder questions. Why were these people kidnapped in the first place? How long were they held? What gaps allowed criminals to operate freely until intelligence finally arrived? Some community members may feel grateful, others may feel frustrated that security only arrives after suffering has already occurred. Both reactions are valid. The rescued victims themselves will carry emotional scars that statistics cannot measure. Being held captive even briefly changes people. Reintegration takes time. Healing is not instant.
From the government's point of view, this operation fits into a broader narrative of renewed security efforts under Operation Enduring Peace. The emphasis on interagency synergy is deliberate. The message is clear. Security is no longer siloed. Army, police, civilian forces, and local knowledge are being combined to deny criminals freedom of movement. The military will likely argue that intelligence-driven operations reduce collateral damage, protect civilians, and improve response time. And in this case, that argument is supported by outcomes. No casualties, no harm to victims. There is also a strategic communication element here. Publicizing successful rescues boosts morale, reassures communities, and sends a warning to criminal groups that forests are no longer safe havens. At the same time, government officials must balance optimism with honesty. One operation does not end kidnapping. One forest cleared does not secure an entire region. But from their lens, incremental gains matter. Momentum matters, and visible results matter even more.
So, where does this leave us? In the immediate term, follow-up operations will determine whether this success has lasting impact. Tracking fleeing suspects is harder than dispersing them. Arrests will test intelligence persistence and regional cooperation. There may also be renewed calls for expanded forest surveillance, drone deployment, and improved rural policing. Communities may demand more permanent security presence rather than reactive missions. Politically, this story may be used to counter narratives of total collapse, especially as insecurity remains a dominant national concern. International observers will watch whether Nigeria can convert tactical wins into strategic stability. Economically, restored confidence, however fragile, can encourage farmers to return to land, traders to reopen roads, and families to breathe a little easier. But perhaps the most important implication is psychological. Every successful rescue chips away at the feeling of helplessness. It reminds citizens that the state is not entirely absent. That fear, while real, is not absolute. At the same time, it reinforces the urgency of addressing root causes: poverty, governance gaps, youth unemployment, and justice delays, without which no number of rescues will be enough. As Nigerians, we must hold two truths at once. We must acknowledge and commend effective action when it happens, and we must continue to demand a country where such rescues are no longer necessary. Because until forests like Badurum Kasa stop being prisons, every success will still feel incomplete. And that is the reality we are all watching unfold.